It's where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former Secretary of the Army Louis Caldera joins us. He was one of the former military personnel who filed yesterday's brief. Also joining us, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Hafey's here. And with me at the table for the hour, former top State Department official during the Obama administration, Rick Stengel, is here. Secretary Caldera, tell me about the argument being made, and then tell me about the consequences if your argument does not prevail.
So first of all, an amicus brief is a friend of the court brief where we try to bring attention to the justices matters that they wouldn't necessarily think about. And because none of the justices, as learned as they are, ever served in the military, we thought it was important for them to know what the national security implications are of the argument that the former president is making. If a former president is immune from prosecution for violating the law, he could order the military to violate that very law in ways that they could still be prosecuted for. So immunity means he wouldn't be prosecuted, but the generals, the soldiers, those who were either told to assassinate a political rival, as his own lawyers argued in court, or if he ordered them to break up peaceful protests of Americans exercising their First Amendment rights, as he wanted to do when he was president, but was told by the Department of Defense officials that the military had no role being used in such a manner, and it would be a violation of the Posse Comitatus law. He could order them to do that, and this would put the military in a terrible position. Do you follow the orders of the commander-in-chief, who you've been sworn to follow, or do you obey the law? Because soldiers actually also have a duty not to obey unlawful orders. They can be prosecuted for obeying unlawful orders. They have been trained ever since World War II, Nazi Germany. The defense of following superior orders is no longer a defense that is tenable of if you violate the law. And this would tear the military apart, because it would put the president's political appointees, those who are loyal to him and tried to force the military to violate the law, against the career military officials who said, hey, our job is to protect the nation against foreign enemies. It is not to violate the law. We are a military that follows the rule of law. And so it would create chaos. It would destroy the trust that has to reside between civilian leaders and military leaders. It would undermine support of the military. As the public said, what is our military being used for? Are they really going to send their sons and daughters to be used in ways that don't have to do with protecting our country from foreign enemies? And it completely sends the wrong message to other countries that, particularly in the context, as you said, of an election, that the democracy that we have told other countries is the best way to protect human rights, the best way to protect free markets and capitalism, the best way to resolve problems peacefully, that the U.S. itself doesn't live up to those aspirations. And that's perhaps why others with more malign intents and forms of government are finding receptive audiences and saying, well, maybe democracy isn't all that the Americans have been telling us it is. So these are important matters that we're trying to bring to the attention of the court, because, and it's not just about Donald Trump. It could be any future president if the court were to find that he has this right. Any future president would be free from the constraints of the rule of law, would be above the rule of law, could use the military in any way he wanted. And that kind of military only exists in places like North Korea and Russia, where their leaders can tell their military to do anything they want, and they will do it.
Secretary Caldera, Chairman Mark Milley is acutely aware of what Donald Trump already sought to do with the military. He was in Lafayette Square with him. He went on to record a video message apologizing to all the men and women of the military. I believe Secretary Mattis was the defense secretary when Donald Trump wanted to use the Pentagon for his border policies, which I think trampled on all sorts of existing laws, were illegal and unconstitutional to start. General Kelly, I think, was witness to Donald Trump fawning over Nazi generals and having a lot of admiration for not just autocratic practices, but brutal, heinous crimes against humanity. Why didn't they sign the amicus brief?
Well, the amicus brief wasn't circulated to every former defense official or general officer. It was a handful of us who began this process, wrote the brief, and then solicited in a short time frame others we thought would be willing to sign on. But the important thing is that we are united. General officers, four-star admirals, generals from all of the branches of the military, and former secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. But you're right in what you're talking about. Former Defense Secretary Mark Esper was essentially fired by President Trump because he wouldn't use the military to violate the laws against the civilian protesters. President Trump has said that he thought General Milley in former times would be executed because he didn't just cozy up to everything that he wanted him to do when he was president. So these are not hypotheticals. These are serious things that have occurred, and he would have even more license if he were ever to become president again.
And Mr. Secretary, it wasn't a gotcha question. I wanted to get at how difficult it is, right, to speak out. If you've served in the United States military, there is something ingrained, right, in that kind of service to not become part of our politics. And if you could just speak to how extraordinary those of you who did sign the brief find this moment.
Well, I mean, that is correct. I mean, some of us were political appointees and have been in civilian life, but by and large, the military must be apolitical. Even for those of us who are political appointees, we treat it as apolitical because we need the support of the American people. We need the support of senators and members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. So we don't want to get involved in partisan politics. Defending the country has to be above politics. It's always been treated that way, really, until the last administration attempted to politicize it, in many cases did politicize military actions and decisions. So, you know, that's the lane we'd like to operate in. It's only because of how dangerous these circumstances is, and this theory that former President Trump has advanced, and how it would harm our national security, that people stepped up and one, wrote this brief, and then two, when we circulated it, a great number of proud Americans who've served their nation faithfully their entire careers in uniform signed on to it.
How painful is this moment for men and women of the military, active duty and veterans whose families have literally sacrificed everything so that the rest of us who tragically take our democracy for granted in all too many instances? How painful is this moment?
Well, I'll only speak for myself because we did not have this in the brief. But, sadly, I think some of the damage has already been done, even by the kinds of allegations, the kinds of theories that the former president has advanced. The events of January 6th were, for the first time in our nation's history, we did not have a peaceful transfer of power. That already begins to undermine our country's standing in the world and our military. But we are a resilient country. We will bounce back from this. We will restore what our country and our flag has stood for, and the strength of our military.
I guess my last question is, if the Supreme Court decides that a president has complete immunity, are you optimistic that we will bounce back from this moment?
I think so. I think so, because I have faith in the American people that they can see the danger signs that are there, and they're going to have a chance to have their say on that in the election in November, as long as we have a free and fair election and the outcome is not disputed in ways that tarnish our tradition of free and fair elections. I think we're a greater country than one person. The founders did warn us that there would be those who might seduce factions and mobs to betray the rule of law and to try to enshrine themselves as authoritarian leaders and undermine our democracy. But we've got to step up to this challenge right now, and that's what I think those of us who signed the brief are trying to do.